So we had actually started thinking about adoption when Wyatt was born. Had two healthy boys, weren't having any more kids. We both have family members that have adopted and internationally. And so we kind of were led that direction internationally. We didn't know where from. And we had, over the years, talked about it and then tabled it because it wasn't the right time. Kids weren't in the right place, finances weren't in the right place. And so we just kind of went back and forth over the course of, 6.5 years. So in summer of 2018, I saw a friend, she was hosting a little girl from Colombia. They had actually adopted twice from Colombia. And we were acquaintances, not necessarily friends, but our kids were in Taekwondo together. And so I kind of got up the courage to talk to her and asked her a couple of questions about how adoption worked. And she goes, hey, well, we're hosting this little girl. We're gonna bring her out, we're gonna have a family night, come meet her. And so I went home and told them about it, and I met her probably a couple days later after she got to the US. She was here for 3 weeks total, and I met her at a Taekwondo event for the kids, and I just fell in love. I didn't have to convince myself anything. I fell in love with her. And then Craig and the boys hadn't met her yet, and so there was a picnic in Rochester where all the families were getting together and the 19 host kids that were getting together. And so I said, let's go, let's take the boys, let's go meet her. So we went to that picnic. It was a Sunday. Met with her, played with her, the kids played with her. And it was kind of an awkward, really awkward situation, but we left the park, and he wouldn't admit it at the time, but she had him wrapped around her little finger already. I remember after we left, the boys kept asking questions. Why was she so small? Why was she so skinny? Where were her mom and dad? And so we kind of explained the best we could. So we just kind of tabled it for a little bit. The next day, I took Grayson with me to an event for work, and I told him we were going to go and visit the family she was staying with. We were going to grab pizza and go over, and he goes, so we're going to go see, and he named off the other kids' names, and he goes, and we're going to go see my sister. And so that was when we knew that we were all in, and she was coming home. And so before she left the U.S. to go back to Colombia, we started our paperwork process, a little out of order, but we started our process, and she was actually staying and living in an area of Colombia more in the tropics, kind of remote area. And so we started at that point pushing to get her moved to Bogota, into one of the top orphanages in Colombia. So our process, whirlwind of paperwork, as fast as we could possibly get our paperwork done. Lots of hoops to jump through, background checks, psychologist evaluations, you name it, we did it.
There was no amount of paperwork that was going to slow her down.
No. Every night I would get done working, do some other stuff, and go through adoption stuff. And I was in, we were going to get it done. And so our goal was to try to get all of our paperwork in before they shut down for Christmas. Colombia did. We didn't quite make it in time.
Which they take a full month off.
Yes, because of their holiday traditions. So our paperwork got down there right after Christmas. We got matched with her. Essentially, she had been previously put on hold in a way, knowing that there is a family in process for her. So we got matched with her in January. Started Skyping with her immediately afterwards. Once we got matched, we had to submit our paperwork to the U.S. So we could get her visa, things like that. Super excited. It moved really, really quickly. March 12th, we found out our encuentro, which is the day we get her, was going to be March 14th. So we were supposed to fly down a couple days before. They called us and said, hey, if you can get down here sooner, get down here sooner. So we flew down the week before her encuentro. Super excited to get her, super excited to see her. The boys were with us. really just loving Colombia. It's a beautiful country, and just loved our time there. But we had woken up the morning of her encuentro, got ready, everybody was in their nice dress clothes, on our way to the orphanage together, and we got a phone call that said we were being put on lockdown, and we had to turn around. So that was that was a little bit hard. Our entire world like fell apart right there. And having to explain it to the kids of what was going on was really hard too that day. So we went back and just kind of went about that week, kind of hearing rumblings that the country might be shutting down shortly. The kids were with us. We knew that everything was remote back home, so we were willing to stay as long as it was going to take. Towards the end of the week, the orphanage pediatrician recommended that we just go ahead and head home because...
And the embassy.
Yeah, and the embassy told us to head home because they were getting ready to shut down the country. So we flew out on a Saturday back to Colombia. We'd been in Colombia for 10 days. Flew back on a Saturday on one of the last commercial flights out of Colombia. And before we left, we wrote letters, signed, saying that we were coming back. We didn't know when. We just prayed it would be soon. So we spent the next 6 months, and I did too, writing letters, filling out paperwork, begging, pleading Colombian consulates to let us on a flight. Finally, the president of Colombia signed an order saying that adoptive families that were so far into the process could get on a humanitarian flight, which those are dedicated only for Colombians. So when we found that out, I mean, I was calling Chicago, New York, any consulate that would listen. So finally, on August 26th, we found out we were getting 2 seats on a humanitarian flight, leaving on the 28th, 2 days later. We couldn't take our kids this time, so we had to make arrangements for them. Grandparents thankfully stepped in and helped out. We flew with another couple who we had met the first time. They were down there with us. That first trip had to leave their girls as well, and then had to fly back. So we flew with them to JFK and then got on a humanitarian flight in New York. Had no idea what we were walking into, no idea. We knew that we were gonna have 2 weeks of mandatory quarantine when we got there. And Colombia was very, very strict about quarantine. They would check up on you to make sure you were in your room. If we left our room and broke quarantine, we would be kicked out of the country for 7 years.
We was in Colombia on our 14-day quarantine. 14 days? Mm-hmm. We had to get COVID test on day 8. So they actually came to our room.
In hazmat suits.
In hazmat suits. Gave us COVID test.
Didn't speak any English, so right. Filling out the forms was great.
And was it day after or 2 days?
2 days later.
2 days later, we got a call from the health administration saying that she tested positive for COVID.
Yeah.
So since she tested positive for COVID and I was exposed, I was 14 days
from our test.
Quarantined from her test, and that was provided I didn't get a positive test in the meantime. So we sat in the room about that was a 700 square foot apartment.
Yeah, 3 weeks.
For a month by ourselves. Yeah, no going outside, no anything. So it was,
yeah.
You got feeling like the walls was closing in on you.
Yeah.
But then, so shortly after that, we got through all of our quarantine stuff. The day we were supposed to have our encuentro day got pushed back 2 days, but as a result of that, we actually was the first parents, we was the first ones, weren't we, to get to actually go into the orphanage to get our child.
To have our encuentro. We were in like full gowns.
Oh yeah.
But we got to see where she was and do the whole traditional where they walk down the hallway with them.
And it's literally, as you walk in to what they call the green room, it's where they do all these encuentros. The hallways all the way up the stairs, around the corners. All the walls are just plastered full of families and little kids, and you know, just all the kids that they've had placed through there over the years. And we definitely got to see, you know, it's, you don't know exactly how kids get treated, but those gals there, I mean, they treat them like their own.
Saints.
Yeah. They went above and beyond their call of duty, and it showed, because all through the Skyping and stuff like that, I'm positive she got spoiled rotten. So
They called her the Princess of Fauna, which was the orphanage that she was at. But once we got her, that was probably the greatest feeling ever. Did not want to let her go. Once we got her, then we were kind of, luckily, before we had gotten her, we knew that our integration week was going to be shortened, which is usually a week. You have her, you get to know her to make sure you still want to go through with the process. So luckily, the orphanage director, her social worker, came to agreement that they would shorten it for us, which was a huge blessing. So we had a whirlwind of about a couple days of doctor's appointments and other things, and then we went to La Mesa, which is in the tropics. So we got to go from 50-degree weather and rain to 90-degree weather and sun. So we were there for a week, and that's where our adoption was finalized. So once we got the paperwork on the Friday, it was a Friday, we headed back to Bogota, and that's where we had to get her passport changed to have her new name on it. We had to apply for her visa so she could be a U.S. citizen, and then we kind of waited. So we got her appointment for the embassy was on a Friday, right before Columbus Day, and they told us they weren't going to print it off until Tuesday. So we had flights booked for Tuesday. That was my mindset. We'll find stuff to do over the weekend. Well, about 2:30, I got a phone call from our in-country representative saying she had her paperwork in hand. And so he and I were on the phone together trying to get flights booked. And he was already back in the US, so he had left 2 weeks before. So getting flights booked. We had a flight booked for 10 o'clock that night. So Samantha and I packed up our apartment of 6 weeks in about 3 hours, headed to the airport, got on a plane, and it took us about 18 hours to get home. So we landed, and that was probably the happiest ever to land. And as soon as we hit US soil, she was a US citizen. So very, very grateful for all of the people that helped us along the way.
And there was a lot with the span of time that we was in the whole process. There was a lot of times we racked up a lot more expenses than what we ever could have possibly dreamed of whenever we first started the process. But I mean, simple things like we had a week where we knew we had a big check and we had to come up with, and we wasn't sure where it was going to come from. And it was like, what, 7 days before?
Yeah.
We had an IRS dispute on our taxes 2 years before that check showed up that week. And so it's just.
And we had people would mail us checks, or we had a nonprofit had heard about our story, and they called and said, hey, we want to get you back there. What can we do to help? Or we had anonymous donations through our adoption agency. So every time when we kind of got, we were worried.
When we thought we was at like our last breaking point, you know, of things.
There was something.
It was, I mean, you really can't describe it.
So going from 2 to 3 kids was a huge adjustment, huge adjustment. And especially our third one being 7 years old, having a personality, having a background was hard, and she's 3 weeks younger than our other youngest son. So it was like having twins when we got home. So when we got home, they bonded really quickly. Her with both boys bonded, but her
and Grayson was thicker than Steve, just.
And they
instantly.
still are.
Oh,
Her and Wyatt, they're best of friends, but like twins, siblings, they fight as well. They're very much wired the same. So So I mean, kind of having to deal with that dynamic as well. But then she's got a lot of health issues that we've worked through, so how to keep the other two involved, keep them where they're not being left out. It's been a challenge. It's been a challenge.
There was some struggle with, you know, the youngest one was used to being spoiled, and then he didn't have all the time in the world, and it was just, but things really leveled out fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Once everything came together.
Had to make a few career moves, things like that, to kind of accommodate family, but we're kind of on a on a good path right now.